This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. 2.5 Admins, episode 283. I'm Joe.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Alan.
And here we are again. And before we get started, your customary Clara article plug, Alan, is Understanding ZFS Scrubs and Data Integrity.
Yeah, so in this article, we cover a bit more depth about what a scrub is, what happens as it's going through the process, and how that affects data integrity and why it's so important to scrub on a regular basis.
Well, link in the show notes as usual. Windows activation over the phone is seemingly dead. I saw some articles about this that linked to a Microsoft support question where someone said that they tried to do it and it didn't work. And so I called the number in the UK and in the US, and sure enough, instead of getting the prompt to put in all your numbers and everything, it just said, this service is now online, go to this URL. So I think that this is the last way to activate Windows offline, and it's gone away. So now you need an internet connection.
Well, not just that, but it was the last way to do it where you could be very sure of what it was sending to Microsoft, because it was just a limited set of numbers that you were typing in on your phone. Whereas if you do the online activation, you don't know how much data it's sending to Microsoft before activating Windows.
Playing devil's advocate here, usually when one does a Windows activation, it's on a brand new installation of Windows, and there's not usually a whole lot to leak. Not much more than, honestly, you already could have encoded into that very opaque set of numbers that you were expected to read out to the operator on the other end of the phone anyway.
What, have you never changed the graphics card and had to reactivate Windows, Jim?
Fair. Very rarely, because I'm a smart person. I don't game on Windows.
I'm sure Alan has had that a few times.
Only when I had to change the whole motherboard. And I think it's the biggest one that always triggers it was changing your network card because it changed the MAC address.
Ah, right, yeah.
But if it was the onboard network card in a motherboard, sometimes in the BIOS, you can set the MAC address, which I wasn't doing for Windows activation reasons, but it was because my cable ISP required me to call them and reactivate things if the MAC address of my router ever changed. And so when I got a new router, I just gave it the MAC address of the old router so that I wouldn't have to futz with calling my ISP to fix the internet.
In this day and age, if you're willingly using Windows, you have entered into a relationship with Microsoft that you don't have a lot of control over. You got to pick whether you got into that relationship, but once you say yes to it, you don't have a whole lot of rights. You mostly are just going to get told what to do, and you have to do it. And if you don't do it, well, you don't get to use Windows anymore. And if that's not something that you enjoy, then, maybe an operating system that's being put out by any huge corporation and doesn't have some kind of community, run upstream, above it that you can escape to if you need to, maybe that's not the right answer for you. Maybe you really want to look into free and open source software. Is it perfect? No. Is there one single entity that controls all of it and can arbitrarily decide to do pretty much anything it wants to and have its thumb over you because you not only can't use their operating system anymore, but you also can't use any of the applications designed for that operating system anymore? No, open source software doesn't have that kind of hold over you. It can't compel you to submit to this kind of thing. And honestly, Joe's point about, you never had to blah, 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 it was really valid. It hit. And I should have thought about, reactivations because I do encounter that in a business perspective fairly frequently. Like Alan said, usually it's an entire motherboard replacement. A simple CPU replacement can sometimes trigger one. Just a GPU can do it. Just a network card can do it. It's pretty unpredictable because there's a composite from a lot of things that gets put together. And basically, it's scoring system kind of like spam. It's not entirely predictable. It changes a little bit from time to time.
Yeah. How much did the machine change? An acceptable amount or too much?
Yeah. But basically, it just decides whether it likes the smell of you or not. If it decides no and it thinks you might be a pirate, well, then it's going to make you reactivate. And if you don't do it, it's going to do the pirate message. And the reason that just kind of didn't occur to me at the moment is because I only encountered it in a business sense. And in a business sense, if you're even thinking about we can't use Windows because, we're worried about what Microsoft might learn from when we activate it, dude, you're not going to be working in that role for very long.
Yeah, it's just there were so many times where some technical thing was meaning normal activation wasn't working. And the doing it via the phone made it work. And it means I think there's just one fewer escape hatch when something is just technically not working.
I would agree with one fewer escape hatch, but I don't know about how great it really was as a fallback. In my experience, 9 times out of 10, when you made that phone call, that rep told you to get fucked. I mean, they said it more politely than that with a thicker accent.
Every time I did it, I was talking to a machine, not a person.
Yeah, you have to work pretty hard, or you used to have to work pretty hard to get through to a person.
Yeah, it was all touch tone automated. So there was nobody answering the phone when I called.
That must be the difference. It used to be you actually had to speak to a human. I haven't had to do one of these in a while personally. Thankfully, I get to farm that off on other people these days. But for a long time, no, you had to talk to an actual human on the other end, and they were suspicious, and they were very likely to just tell you, no, go buy another copy.
How fake blue screens of death and trusted build tools are used to construct a malware infection.
Yeah, I thought this one was pretty clever. So, it works like most malware, initial access via a user clicking a link in a phishing email or something. And in this case, it mimics a reservation cancellation alert from like a hotel booking platform. And then a little social engineering where the user is directed to a fake page that displays a CAPTCHA-like style browser error. And clicking on this error triggers a fake blue screen of death animation, making it look like the computer has crashed or whatever. But on that blue screen of death, it prompts the user how to fix the problem. And that prompt is literally press Windows key R and then do Control V and then press Enter or click OK. And so in this fake blue screen of death, it's getting you to copy and paste a PowerShell string that basically goes to a website and then runs GCI on your C drive and some filtering and does a bunch of stuff to get data and infect your machine however they want. In this case, it's running a whole Visual Studio Code project.
Crucially, not copy and paste, just paste, because the copying is automatic.
I would argue that that's not really that crucial. It's a nice little fun touch, but if you can get a user to do that, if you can get a user to WinR, CMD, and then paste and hit enter, honestly, I think you can get them to copy the string with the full malicious nonsense too.
Right. But this is not doing CMD. This is just Windows R paste.
Fair enough.
And the paste happens to run PowerShell and do all the nastiness to your computer.
I still think that the typical user who can be convinced to WinR and then paste and hit enter probably would have copied a pretty malicious string and pasted and hit an enter too.
Yes. Although I think it wouldn't seem as much like a blue screen of death if you were expected to highlight a text box and copy the content out of it.
It already doesn't. You can't interact with a BSOD. Like, it's so blatantly not a BSOD in so many ways.
Yep.
This is a technique that I've been seeing a lot lately, the pop-ups of one variety or another, that like nothing bad has actually happened yet. But if you do what's on the big scary, oh my God, you have a virus or you got a blue screen of death or whatever, if you do the thing it tells you to do, which, yeah, usually it promises to be really simple. Oh, just click here and it'll fix it. Just like the fraudulent spams that you get that claim to be from your mail server misspelled administrator. Click here to keep your email account. Like, the researchers who discovered this one and were analyzing it, they like to use this term click fix. This is a click fix scam, click fix. And I'd never seen the term before, and I wish they'd bothered to expand it even once. But if you stop and think about it, yeah, it's you're trying to convince people that, hey, look, all you got to do is just make this one click and I'll fix your computer. And it's like, okay, if you're bright enough that you know what the problem is and you know it needs fixing, why do you need me to click a thing? Why can't you just do it? Like, you're not telling me click OK. You're saying I need to click a thing to make this happen. It doesn't really hold water.
Yeah, but is Windows R and Control V that much different from, say, Control Alt Delete to a normal person?
Yeah, honestly. I mean, once you get into turbo computer illiteracy, sure. But once you get into that point, what are we even talking about? People who don't know how to use computers don't know how to use computers, Film at 11? That's not a very interesting podcast.
I suppose, but I think by simplifying it to literally 2 combinations of keys, you're going to catch way more people than if there was more complex copying and stuff involved.
Yeah, well, that's what I was looking here of, the instruction is number 1, hold Windows key and press R. And then instruction number 2 is hold Control and press V. They've not told them to let go of the Windows key yet. How many people are like, if they're not going to understand just the Windows key R and without having to be told, hold this and then press that, if you don't tell them to let go, how many people would have got caught by this if they hadn't done Windows key V instead of Control V?
I promise you, tons and tons of those people who made that exact mistake you're talking about got their nephew who's good at computer to come over, and probably half of those nephews who are good at computer showed them how to WinR and Control V properly.
Yeah.
It reminds me of one of the ones that perplexed the hell out of me when I was a young person helping people with their computers. And this guy I'd helped before calls up and he's like, there are 2 mouse cursors on my computer and I can't figure out what's going on. I was on the phone with him for like 15 minutes trying to figure out what the hell he could possibly be talking about. What could be going on this computer? I just couldn't get it. So I went all the way over there and then realized, can you guess what it was?
I'd swear you've told me this story before, but I can't remember the punchline.
It was literally a banner ad that had a mouse cursor clicking on a button or whatever. He was like, there's this other mouse and it's moving by itself and it's clicking things. It shouldn't be. I'm like, I thought literally that his computer was being remote controlled by somebody somehow. And I'm like, unplug it from the internet just in case or whatever. And I get over there and it's literally a banner ad. And I'm like, I feel a little dumb for not having guessed that, but Jesus.
That's the thing. Like you don't know and they don't know, and you have to meet in the middle somewhere. I actually had a kind of similar experience today at a client. There was an employee at a particular client that this is a new client, so I'm still getting to know everybody. And this particular employee was very upset because she thought that everything was going into her OneDrive in all these different places, and she couldn't figure out why. She couldn't figure out why there's all these extra copies of everything. And it turns out she was just confused because when you open up Windows Explorer and you get into OneDrive, there are 3 different ways to get to every single folder. Well, I shouldn't say every single folder. Users very frequently misclick and wind up pinning folders into the quick access in File Explorer and have no idea how they did it or why it's there. So that's one way to get there. Obviously, the normal way to get there is through the normal file and folder hierarchy, the local one on the computer. But there's also a separate OneDrive file and folder hierarchy, and you can navigate to the exact same file any of those 3 ways. Actually, technically 4 ways, because you can wind up with both the OneDrive way to get to the folder and the local way to get to the folder. Both can be pinned to the quick access at once.
And you're also forgetting about the recent access one. So there's number 5.
Correct. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that one was also confusing her. She didn't understand the recent access pane either. So to her, she just like, files are everywhere and I'm just digging at random and I don't understand why there's, 3, 4, whatever these things. But the thing is, she didn't have the vocabulary to talk about quick access or, to talk about, one frame of a dialogue versus another or like any of these other things, how we're describing this to one another. All she could say is like, my OneDrive is horrible. It's a mess. Things are all over the place. Multiple copies are everywhere. There's a problem this one time and the other IT company restored it. And it's just been weird ever since. And this took like a 15-minute conversation. At one point, I broke out like a sticky pad and I drew like a little diagram with a Walmart and 2 roads that led to it and like a shortcut that came from another road entirely and was like, but like to illustrate, like there's only one file. There's just different ways to get there. And like, that helped. And then once we got through all that, I could also find out there was an issue because there was a folder that was randomly marked read only. And so it wouldn't sync to the cloud. And so it showed an error on the entire OneDrive. These were all relatively minor things. That user is happy now. I resolved all of her issues and she now is using her OneDrive and thinks that it's working fine and no longer is upset with it. But there was no way to get there without like a 15-minute conversation where I could literally see the things she was seeing and also like make that real effort. You can't just like expect everybody's going to know all the right words. You got to meet them halfway. You got to speak their language. You got to give them a chance to learn to speak enough of yours. Like neither one of you can do it alone. You have to bridge the communication gap.
Yeah, I had a similar one literally today that was understanding what the phrase, using your email to log into something means. There was some confusion about, somebody's email account getting deactivated and whether that would stop them from logging into other services that happen to use that email as the username. And like trying to make them understand the difference between like single sign-on and just your email address is your username. And so just because we deactivate somebody's email address doesn't mean they can't log into these 7 other services that happen to just, the other websites can't tell that that person doesn't work here anymore.
Oh, Alan, you misled that person, because that's sometimes true, but an awful lot of modern services will periodically send emails, and if they don't get an SMTP2XX, they'll decide they no longer have a valid email for you, and they'll be like, you need to give us a valid email.
Right. Well, there's also ones where like Microsoft's like, you don't have a password. We will just email you a unique code every time you want to log in.
Mm-hmm.
Slack with the magic code or whatever, magic link.
The Slack one drives me nuts because it's like I have 2FA. So I have to get one code for my email and then type in the code for my Authenticator app. Like, can I just have a password with my 2FA? Like, please?
Moving things back to the original topic.
I don't remember what the original topic was, Jim.
The original topic was fake blue screens and the mechanisms that, the malware and the control V, and, the actual mechanism is it uses a PowerShell command, downloads a bunch of crap, actually builds it locally, with msbuild.exe, so you wind up with a valid digitally signed file is what really gets the rat on your system. Because this is, the goal here is to install a rat. It's called DC rat, and it does all the nasty things you can think of. It can hollow out processes, and, it's persistent. It can exfil data. It can do all the nasty things you can think of. But I did want to make the comparison for our gold star Linux users in the audience. I know we've got a few of you out there who are like, what is all this crap? Well, this is basically the Windows equivalent of convincing somebody to pipe curl to sudo bash. And lest we feel too superior as Linux users, let's stop and think about just how many Linux projects expect us to do precisely that.
Let's do some free consulting then. But first, just a quick thank you to everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. And if you want to send in your questions for Jim and Alan or your feedback, you can email show@2.5admins.com. Another perk of being a patron is you get to skip the queue, which is what Teeman has done. I have a question about recovering from bad RAM with ZFS. I thought the NVMe drive was going bad on my Ubuntu main machine, but it turns out my RAM does not pass memtest anymore. I'm never building a machine without ECC again if I can help it. I manually replicate to a couple of USB drives occasionally. I also have some snapshots replicated to my server running an older version of Ubuntu and some Borg-based backups to a service. I want to make sure my data is as okay as possible. Any suggestions? My current plan is to move to a new, properly functioning machine.
Starting with the NVMe drive, where I would start, obviously, is a ZFS scrub, which is going to verify the checksums. Now, there's a small possibility that the bad RAM caused the data to get messed up before it got written by ZFS, and so the checksum is for the broken version. But in that case, there's not much you can do about it, and there's not really a way to tell. But for almost all of the cases, it was probably fine when it got written. It was that when it got read that things were getting garbled. And so a scrub will detect that. And depending on your parity, may be able to fix it. Or at least after you run the scrub, you'll see a list of files. When you do zpool status-v, it'll actually have a list of the files that are broken and need to be restored from your backups. And that makes it much easier to pull them out of your Borg backup or whatever. Or if you have a recent snapshot that's been replicated to that older Ubuntu machine, you can just pull that back or use that as to begin the new machine, right? You build the new machine, you set up an empty ZFS pool, and then you replicate from that older Ubuntu to the new machine, and it will have everything that was in that snapshot. And that way, everything was good at that time. The USB drives that you do occasionally, that occasionally part there is really what makes that not really a backup. And, maybe you got lucky and you did it occasionally recently enough, but I'm guessing by the way you wrote it that it was too long ago and it didn't really provide a lot of benefit to you.
Yeah, that's probably correct. And to be fair, it's a couple of USB drives, so manually is the only way that's going to happen, which also means occasionally is the only way that's going to happen, because let's be honest here, nobody is religiously following one of those schedules for very long. I've been in this business for 30 years now, and the first time I encountered this schedule that's supposed to be religiously followed, somebody has to do the manual thing to make the backup happen and verify that it happened every day. The first time I find one of those that actually survives for long, I'll let you know, but I haven't seen that work yet.
Yeah, it's bad enough for cron job or whatever without monitoring.
Yeah, I mean, you have to set up automated backups. You have to set up as much monitoring as you can, and you have to care enough to pay attention to it. So with all that said, this is a common theme on the show, but USB drives, really not the best idea. Grab a $50 beater off of eBay if you can't scrounge up a desktop from somewhere else for completely free. Throw your drives in there and set up a cron job, replicate. Use something like Sanoid Monitor Snapshots and Sanoid Monitor Health and pipe that to the healthchecks.io if you don't want to set up a full-on Nagios instance like Alan or I do. It doesn't have to be super hard. The other thing I want to tack onto this is Alan gave some good advice about the scrub. I will say, however, if you haven't resolved your hardware problem before you do the scrub, you're going to keep seeing errors and you're going to keep seeing new errors. The thing is, some of those errors that you see on one scrub, you won't see on the next one because you've got weird flaky RAM and you're having weird flaky errors. Now, some people are worried that if they scrub while they have bad RAM, it's going to murder their pool, and that's not really the case. However, the scrub may not do you much good until you're certain you've got it in a machine that's actually operating properly.
Yeah, I've been in almost the same situation. I had a machine that was acting flaky, turned out to be bad RAM. So my next machine had ECC RAM, but then the machine after that conspired against me to not have ECC.
I wish every machine that I build or operate could have ECC. And for a couple of years, I was trying to do that with the Ryzen processors. But while it's technically possible, it's a world of never-ending rattlesnakes, man. You're hoping for like backdoor support that not enough people really care about. The manufacturer might support it and not tell you they support it. The manufacturer might tell you they support ECC and then not support it. They might tell you they support it and you put the ECC in and the system booted and you think it's great. But if you really dig into the logs, you discover that it's not actually using the ECC bits. All of these things are very possible if you're using consumer-grade CPUs and motherboards. Whereas if you go into the server-grade stuff, it's always been way too expensive to begin with, and now it's getting like really supply chain-wise hard to find.
Yeah, so if you end up with just two ex-corporate boxes, $50 or $100 each, that's much more obtainable, right? And it's kind of good enough because you've got two of them, and if one goes wrong, you're going to know about it.
It's better.
It's much better to have two separate machines and having them replicate one to the other or even back and forth if you have a need for two separate machines than it is to have one machine and rely on ECC. It's kind of like, we say RAID is not a backup. Well, ECC helps with uptime, but it doesn't protect you from everything. So you still need a backup even if you have ECC.
Yep.
And ECC is not going to help you from your NVMe drive dying, right? It sounds like this is a single drive machine. And, that's perfectly okay. My FreeBSD laptop is also a single drive machine. But yeah, you can't depend on any bit of hardware to ever be perfect, whether it's got ECC or not, whether it's got RAID or not. It's hardware. It's going to hardware.
Well, what I've learned from going on 6 years of doing this show is treat every storage device like it is about to die.
Everything is about to die. Entropy is inescapable. We are all proceeding toward the heat death of the universe. All we can do is delay the things that we like for a while, and that's really what this is all about. And you can reduce this to a like in InfoSec terms, it's a trust problem, right? We don't want to trust things. The things we trust, that means the things that can stab us when we least expect it. So if you have this idea that I'm going to build the most reliable possible single machine and that's the only thing I'm ever going to do, well, when it nails you, you're going to be completely nailed because you put all your eggs in that one basket. As opposed to you build a couple of cheaper machines, they don't have the same features. Maybe they don't have ECC. Maybe there are more potential problems they can have. However, you set it up so that as long as you still have either of those machines, you haven't lost the ball game. And that ball game is going to keep going for a lot longer than the one with only one player.
Yep. The one other thing I wanted to mention was you mentioned the older version of Ubuntu. So the way ZFS replication works is it is kind of version agnostic. There are flags when you do ZFS replication. You can opt into features that require certain newer versions, although most of them now are pretty common. Like you can choose to send it already compressed, or you can support encryption or large blocks and so on. But in general, using ZFS replication, you can go between any version of ZFS to any version of ZFS. 10-year difference in the version of Ubuntu would still work. And importantly, a ZFS replication you made and saved 10 years ago would still be able to be restored today. And that's really useful to be able to shoot things back and forth between machines that aren't necessarily the same version.
Right, well, we better get out of here then. Remember, show@2.5admins.com if you want to send in your questions or your feedback. You can find me at joelrest.com/mastodon.
You can find me at mercenariesysadmin.com.
And I'm at Alan Jude.
We'll see you next week.